Hi, it's Ty here from Portland, Oregon. I'm talking with my good friend Shaun Clark, who is in Eugene, Oregon. Shaun and I have known each other, gosh, it's definitely been over a decade. It might be close to 15 years. And Shaun is an entrepreneur and app developer. He's done this multiple times, and that he's on at least his third round now. Maybe there may be more in there that I'm missing, but I kind of wanted to start out with talking about Shaun's newest venture, and then maybe we might dig into some of his past as we go. But start out, we'll talk about his newest venture, highlevel. So welcome, Shaun. Thanks for joining me via the webcast here. And yeah, why don't you tell us a little about highlevel and what you guys do, what products you're offering, and who the customer base is?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, first, thanks for having me. So yeah, highlevel is a marketing automation and CRM product, and our customers are exclusively marketing agencies. So we sort of make a all-inclusive sort of all the features you can imagine you needing from a software perspective as a marketing agency and a service perspective as a marketing agency, kind of all in one platform. And then our end customers, the marketing agencies, utilize those tools to actually service their customers in the market.
How did you pick that particular market, the serving marketing agencies?
Yeah, so to be honest, I did not choose it. So this is one of those things in life where I can take zero credit. What happened with us is I started off in one direction, and when I was in the middle of going that direction, a marketing agency actually reached out to me, and that marketing agency said to us, listen, we really like what you're doing, but what do you think about adding these other features? And if you did, it would really help us out. And we sort of added those features because we thought, well, on one hand they're a good idea, and on the other hand, who knows, maybe this is an opportunity. And it turns out it was a fantastic opportunity. So we just lucked out.
So are there competitive products to what highlevel does?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, interestingly, not directly competitive, but I would say sort of perpendicularly, I don't know, sort of right there in the same lanes for sure. Absolutely. Some really big companies, highly funded companies. Yeah, much bigger than us.
So what would you say your competitive advantage then is for highlevel over the competition?
Well, I hate to give away the secret, but the fundamental difference between us and other products is that we treat our customer, the marketing agency, as a first-class citizen. So unlike other products who they would say they sell to marketing agencies, but I would disagree. I would say they mostly sell through marketing agencies. So they fundamentally see them as a lead channel or a lead source, but they don't see them as a customer. So once they get that marketing agency, pull their customers out, if that marketing agency goes away tomorrow or their customers fire them, those people could care less because they've sort of gotten the leads out of them. And that's really all they're used for. Whereas we're the opposite, which is, we sell only to the marketing agency and they're our partner.
I see. Does the marketing agency white label your product, or does your product? I see.
Yeah, they do. Absolutely. In fact, and believe it or not, it's way more than a sales strategy. And I think this is why it works. It's actually something we live every day, which is, when I first started selling this marketing automation product, I was selling directly to small business owners, and it became painfully obvious early on that the problem with small business owners is they have no time to market their business. And the ones who try sort of do it on a Sunday afternoon, and they give it about an hour's worth of work. And if it works, great. And if not, then that's fine. They'll just go back to whatever they were doing. And so that's a really terrible marketing strategy, ultimately. And so what I realized is the marketing agencies are really the heroes of small business. I mean, they're the people who are out there every day doing the hard work of bringing people through the front door to, any number of small businesses, and really doing the, sort of like how the sausage gets made, right? Like they're doing the thing that none of those business owners want to do, but it's super critical for them to run their business and grow their business. And so we really love the opportunity that we get to focus on those people because they do some pretty important work.
Yeah, I wish the accounting vendors operated the way you do in terms of the accounting software, because, yeah, I think it's similar to what you were talking about the big brands in your industry do. they pretend to be helping the accountants, but they just as soon go straight to the consumer if they can as well.
Yeah, I mean, you're just a lead source to them. I mean, they're just looking for you to kind of like give them the customers, and then if you stick around, great, and if you don't, well, that's fine too, as long as the customer keeps paying them for the software. So,
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the traditional model, and I think probably has worked for some time, but I think that it's now time to really focus on some of those other people as actual customers versus just lead buckets.
Well, what you're doing sounds brilliant to me, because I know in my own industry for services, I say, professional services, one of the directions for the future is to become technology enabled service providers, where they have kind of a software stack that they use to enable their software or enable their service. I mean, and yeah, you're doing that. You're helping those marketing firms follow that plan. So I think that's great. Yeah. So how do you actually go about finding and attracting the firms that you work with?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So we're really lucky in the fact that we have an amazing group of customers, and so what we've done is we've really just relied on our customers to get the word out. So we incentivize them through an affiliate program, so it's so far to date it has really been, hey, listen, please go out and share this with other people. If you love it, they'll love it too. And, we'd love to grow it. And, we make the commitment that all of the dollars we're bringing back, we're investing in making the product better. So it's kind of this really fun journey. Like, we're waking up every day to serve this audience, and they wake up every day to help us both by using the product, but also by telling others. And so that's been our primary distribution channel up to this point.
Well, that's fantastic. How many people are working with the company? I know probably it's a mix of you
like
and
employee perspective. Yeah. So
contractors, or however you do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, today, most of our people, so it's an all remote team. So we've got about 20 software developers now, and we've got about, I'd say 8 other people between customer service. We have people doing content, affiliate relations, sort of head of customer service, that kind of thing. So about, 28 people or so?
Mm-hmm. Are you, have you been able to grow out of your own operating cash flow, or are you taking on some funding?
Nope, it's 100% bootstrapped. So it's profitable, and I think it's a great way to run a business. And certainly, there are definitely days where you think, well, this could be a lot easier if we just had $10 million of somebody else's money. But it's also a lot of fun to wake up and sort of chart your own course. So far, that's how we've gone.
So I think that being an entirely remote workforce, that kind of adds a different wrinkle to the question I'm about to ask. So kind of ask this question from 2 dimensions. One would be, for being a startup and kind of having and being the size you are, but also being remote, what's the role of company culture in a scenario like yours?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think this is a developing answer. Like, this is definitely a challenge for me, because there are different phases in a business, and I'm still very much, my mind is still very much in the mode of, okay, how do we get the next customer? How do we get the next feature? Like, very reactive and not very planful, and not a lot of time to sit back and think about those types of topics. But at the same time, they're important topics. As you get bigger, other people in the organization are definitely thinking that way. So what I've tried to do is, A, surround myself with people who are better at that than I am, and then B, where we can, try to come together. Like, we have all company meetings, like first thing Friday mornings. And then we have a couple of other sort of group calls with different groups in the company. Development has a stand-up a couple days a week on their own. Customer service, same way. And a lot of that, I think, is about just staying connected and staying with each other. We also have, we're planning this, although it's not done yet, planning a big company get-together at some point this year, later in the year, just so that everybody can meet each other face-to-face.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it. I've worked with a software company similar that has a similar program like what you're doing. They've always been remote, and that's exactly what they do, is a once a year or sometimes semi-annual all company get together in some central location. So yeah, that sounds, and I think the remote working is something that I enjoy myself, working with many of my different clients, and I think it's a great thing to be able to kind of model that out for the future of business. Okay, so I want to dig back a little bit to um, why you decided to build a business around the technology as opposed to just create the technology and say sell it off, right? What led you to what led you to want to build a company?
Oh, you mean like I didn't know there was another option. Can you just build technology and sell it? I don't know how to do that personally.
Well, I guess, and I think probably it relates to what you mentioned earlier, being self-funded through operations. Yeah, you kind of need the operating cash flow to fund the development to some extent.
Well, I mean, everybody's journey is different, and I'm sure there are people that are much more well connected than me. But I had a prior SaaS company to this, and you know what I learned, and I would get VCs that would call me, and I was at first I was really excited about it, but then I would get on the phone with them, and they would be like, "Hey, listen, are you at $1 million run rate or more?" And I said, "Well, no, but you know, I could get there if I got some funding." And they said, "Oh, well, we're not really interested until you get to $1 million run rate." And I thought, wait, how does this make any sense? Like, isn't that the whole point? Like, aren't you guys there to help me? But so what I learned was they're not really interested in anything that is, you know, less than $1 million run rate. And so, once you get there, so that's hard, right? You kind of, I mean, I don't know about you, but getting to $1 million run rate is a tough thing. And then when you get there, you know, you kind of have to figure out, well, is this just something where I need to pour gas on the fire and I'm kind of trying to do a big land grab and all that? Um, or, you know, is this a real business that I could run and scale and grow out of profits?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that is the challenge, and I suspect that $1 million run rate that you're referencing is, you know, one of many ways they kind of try to see if there's other people with skin in the game who are already kind of funding the burn as it is, and then are they willing to jump in on top of that?
Well, and they want easy wins, right? So they're looking for an idea that already has, you know, people who are willing to pay for it. And
Right.
their goal is, you know, they're mostly just trying to figure out, you know, can I find somebody who's sort of like, you know, where if I can just accelerate their growth, they'll do stupendous things because of the acceleration, and they're just sort of early on in their journey and they just need that capital to go faster. Or is this just some idea that, you know, is a hobbyist pursuit, or just isn't something that has any kind of wings? Now, I definitely have met other entrepreneurs who have gotten money like from day one off an idea, but I think I think that's more of a fantasy than a reality.
I see. Yeah. Well, you know, as we've referenced earlier in this discussion, this isn't your first rodeo. You did something like this before with a different app, a different product. Take us back and tell us a little bit about that. That was Invoice Sherpa, right?
That's right. Yeah. So, I mean, that was a really interesting journey, and I learned a lot of lessons. So that was for all you accounting folks, you'll know what this is, but it's automated invoice collection software, or automated accounts receivable software, and it effectively just sent people emails to tell them to pay bills until they did. But turns out that that's a really big problem, and I grew it off of my kitchen table to about 1,000 customers. Um, you know, I learned a lot of lessons. One is I never charged enough. I never marketed myself enough. I got all of my customers from the QuickBooks and Xero market. But I would say the biggest lesson I learned was never build an app that is reliant upon another app for its success, because you may well find that someday you wake up and that other app has noticed you and has decided to rip off your features, and all of a sudden overnight you may lose your business.
Sure.
I also learned that, you know, at least this is my core belief, that software online or software as a service has fundamentally shifted away from features, and I think it's now going to be more focused on verticals. You know, I think that features used to be expensive to build, sort of in their own right, and so when you would build a feature, you'd monetize it across every industry vertical. So, like, take a MailChimp, for example. They built email marketing, which at the time was probably hard, and so as a result, they had to monetize it across tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of businesses. But now, those core MailChimp features that they originally started with are probably available for free somewhere on the internet, you know, somebody else writing the code for you. So to think that you could repeat that performance is, I think, pretty unlikely. So now I think we're shifting to a vertical focus. So it's less about, you know, can I get this feature? It's more about, can I get this feature molded into a piece of software that also has 10 other features that fit my vertical or my industry. So they really make sense to me as the user.
Yeah, that's super interesting in terms of that shift that you're describing. I think something I think I may be noticing as well. I'd love to get your take on it. Is I guess I'd say it this way: is that just because there is another app in a vertical that you may want to develop for, that shouldn't scare you away, because it seems like there is a market for multiple apps that may have similar features in the same verticals, because the entire market space never really wants to have just one option. They want to have like multiple options.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I think that if I were starting over today, I think though what I would do is I would try to hyper niche. So what I think is, so I think so that there's sort of, as a SaaS entrepreneur, I mean, there's different roads. So like if you're trying to get venture capital, I don't know exactly what advice to give you. Because I actually think that market continues to get more and more pressured. I mean, if you think about the model there, it's like I give you $1 and 7 years later, you give me back 10. And the problem with that is you need really big markets to disrupt to make that plausible, especially if you're going to deploy large amounts of cash. And so I think the problem with that is there's very few markets left to disrupt. I mean, there's certainly several, but I think those opportunities continue to slim down. Where I think a bootstrapped entrepreneur can make the most potential returns and create a business is find a niche, and if at all possible, find a niche within a niche, and really focus down on those people. Because I think, again, it's less about the cost of a feature. So I think now it's like each of those features fundamentally to produce is just cheaper than it used to be. And so those are no longer going to be your sort of competitive advantages. Your competitive advantage, I think, ultimately then becomes your understanding of a particular vertical. And if you just wake up and show up and get involved in that vertical every single day, I think you'll make huge penetration. And I don't, and you can even pick a vertical you don't know at all, but you just need to be committed to learning and becoming part of and creating a community around. That to me is like the ultimate go-to-market plan for a bootstrap SaaS business. Mm-hmm. And what's cool about it is, let's say you picked a market that had, 50,000 businesses in it. That's a very small number relative to, like, a venture capitalist is never going to come after you with any kind of cash, because 50,000 is just a pittance of an industry. But if you had 10,000 of those 50,000 and those people were paying you $100 a month, that would be a nice business to have if you could roll it up with 4 or 5 employees. So I think that's kind of how I would think through how to attack that problem today.
Mm-hmm. So what are your, you learned some lessons from Invoice Sherpa, and now with highlevel, what are your biggest business challenges?
Gosh, I think the same as always, getting more customers, creating more value for your existing customer base. I think it's also about balancing a new feature against, how many more people am I going to get if I put this feature out? Yeah, a lot of people might want it, but no one's canceling over it. So do I deploy it? Do I put the resources toward it? And the thing with software is it's not really a one-time deal. Like, people think, oh, you just write the code and it runs itself. But really, it's more like I write the code, I put the feature out, and then I have to put an employee to sit there and continue to enhance it pretty much forever, right? And so there's those considerations. And it's just, trying to figure out how do you create more value so you can hold on to your customers longer. How are you creating more value, not just for your end customer, but what are you doing to help them create more value for their customer? Because really that's what it's all about. I think about every day, how do I get up today and make more money for not myself, but for my marketing agencies that are my customers? Because I just know that if I make that person $1, I will become exceedingly more valuable. And now they're not going to want to leave me ever, because I'm literally making the money. So I think those are the biggest things I think about just in terms of growing and scaling.
Mm-hmm. What you've obviously adopted to this lifestyle of being a business owner, being an operator. What is it about the lifestyle? What's the benefit of running your own business for you?
Gosh, that's a really loaded question for me. I don't know. I think part of it is I just never really learned any differently. So I dropped out of college to start a business. So I always felt that I'm sort of semi-unemployable, then when you get to go around sort of doing what you want to do, you kind of figure no one would want you to do that for them as their employee. So I always kind of felt a little forced to do it this way. But yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. And then as I've gotten older, things have changed. I mean, when you're younger, you think, oh, well, I'll sell out like that guy who made tons of money, or I'll scale up like that guy who made a ton of money, or whatever. But I think as I've gotten older, it's just more about, how do I create a sustainable, durable business that day in and day out can create a lot of value for somebody else, and hopefully over time create value for me. And, eventually I can retire off of the funds from the business. And I don't know, sort of,
Sure.
It just seems like a way to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're kind of what, sometimes you hear about that true bred entrepreneur that you just, like you said, you don't know how to do it any other way. It's just natural for you to approach work and life that way. Well, we have to ask, given what I do, how do you actually do accounting in your business?
Well, not very well, although things are changing every day. I try to keep it simple. I've recently hired, but of course I've hired an accounting firm for tax purposes and all that. And then now I'm slowly bringing on a bookkeeper to sort of handle all of the ins and outs. But yeah, in general, I mean, I have QuickBooks Online, but my wife is a CPA, thankfully, so she's at least more diligent about asking me and pressuring me and holding my hand to do things right and do things on time. So between all of those things, that's kind of sort of how the accounting works.
Sure. What's next for High Level?
Well, it's actually some really big and amazing things. So back to trying to create more value for our customer base. Recently working with my clients, I realized that one of their biggest challenges, I sort of thought, when I first got into this business and I really conceptualized serving marketing agencies, I sort of thought of myself as a tools vendor, right? Like I make a better hammer or a better saw, and I'm just giving these tools over to these professionals, and then they're going to take it from there. And really, they're going to judge me based on my tools and how good they are. But in reality, they have a lot of business challenges outside of the tools that software just fundamentally can't necessarily solve for. So recently, we've learned that lots of these agencies are either one person in a dream, or they're a small group of people. And the biggest issue they run into is scaling their agencies. So a lot of these guys, they start off with nothing. They prospect. They bring in a couple of customers. Then all of a sudden, they have to switch over to servicing those customers. Their sales pipeline dries up. 6 months goes by. They lose a couple customers. And now, they've got a cash flow crunch. They got to go back to prospecting, but the pipeline's totally dry. So they're starting over. So they do this ebb and flow, and it's really tough for them. And so what we're going to do is we're going to come in and start providing services on a white label basis for the agency so that they can just stay focused on sales 24/7. And then they can outsource all of the actual fulfillment to us, which, some of that will no doubt be technology enabled, but there's going to be a lot of bodies there and a lot of people to do those fulfillment services. And so really adding services and pairing them with software is going to be huge, not only for us, but also for our customers. But it'll certainly be a big change for us as well.
Wow. If you had to guess, what would that mean in terms of your head count 12 months from now?
Oh gosh, I think it'll be 10x.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, easily. Because currently with our current customer base, if I just do really low adoption rates on the services, I mean, the numbers are huge. And so as a result, I'll have to staff up considerably.
Well, that is exciting, and I hope maybe you'll join us again. Maybe we can do this again.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Later in the year to find out where you're at and how these things go.
Where are they now? Did it work out? Did they crash and burn?
Well, I'm sure there will be successes, but like all businesses, and as your experience is borne out, sometimes the success happens kind of in a different way than you might have expected. So
exactly,
that'll be definitely an interesting follow-up that we can have.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks again for joining me, and we will see our audience in the next segment.
So what do you got? So mine was actually lighthearted kind of entrepreneurial spirit. This actually just showed up on my Google newsfeed. So it's a article written in Entrepreneur Magazine, and it's written by Maggie Ginsberg. And so it's a really well-written article. It's more of like a kind of a narrative storytelling kind of article, and it goes through a couple different founders. But basically the gist of the article is moving home for entrepreneurs. So a lot of these entrepreneurs in the last like 20 years, if you wanted to start something, you had to pack up whatever you were doing and move to the coast. You had to move to New York, Boston, Silicon Valley, because that's where the talent was, that's where the investment money was, that's where you made tech startups, or you made startups, period, is you did that, unless you're building, a hardware store in Duluth, Iowa or something, you went to the coast to build your whatever app or store or whatever it is, because you had the resources there. And what they're saying now, and I've noticed this kind of in our kind of LinkedIn peripheral kind of content, is that a lot of this innovation, investment, startup scenes are happening and are thriving outside of the coast. And we see it here. Even though we are on a coast, Portland isn't really known to be like a mecca of startups like Silicon Valley or Boston or anything like that. And so I guess they go through a couple different stories, but they're talking about like places like Wisconsin and Pittsburgh and Indianapolis and these places that you wouldn't usually think of as tech startup hubs having really vibrant kind of entrepreneurial startup incubators that are well funded now, and that people are actually leaving the coast to come back to a hometown or to a place. And they give various reasons. They say that talent is rich because they are tech schools, and tech is basically invaded everywhere. So talent's good and cheap because you're in the Midwest. The price of like a headquarters or something is something like 1/12 of what it would be. 1/12 of what it would be, and then probably 100 times bigger than what you can get in Boston or New York or San Jose. And then on top of it, now there are investment clubs and people that have invested in startups that have made money, and now they're, it's kind of like a continuing loan fund or a grant fund for startups where these incubators are fully funded by investments in profitable businesses that they are then able to then return to the company. And some for-profit businesses have gotten into helping spur these innovations in their community. So I guess one of the things that I found funny in the article, before I kick it to you guys for kind of questions, was that one of the guys that was moving from San Francisco, he wanted to move to like Wisconsin or whatever, approached his possible investors about this and said, I'm thinking about moving there, and explained all the financial savings he would make off of this and how much farther their investment would go. And their answer to him was that they don't think that they could have ran the business or help him grow the business in like Indiana or wherever he was moving to outside of San Francisco. And I thought that was weird, that here's these guys that really believe in tech and this, technology kind of startup culture, but they're not willing to remote manage their investments. They want it close to the vest.
Or to like really believe in tech.
Right. So I just get, I guess, lighthearted thing, but I wanted to get your guys' opinion on, do you think, like the concentration of those tech kind of startup incubator things are now moving away from the coast? Or do you think maybe this is just like a flash in the pan? Yeah, there's some money out there, but really to be successful in a startup or an entrepreneurial kind of venture, do you need to be on the coast, I guess, to get that kind of funding, that kind of exposure? Because you're not going to get the same kind of exposure in Indiana. I guess one of the ways the article put it was, if you do go and do these startups outside of those areas, you are kind of a big fish in a small pond if you're good. Mm-hmm. But then do you get the same exposure as being, a medium-sized fish in a huge pond?
I think it's one of those things that I think is working its way more towards what you're saying, where it's getting decentralized, and over time we're gonna see more and more of startups being happening all over. But I think it is, like you're saying, it's one of those things people get, tied up in their ways, and so even a company who knows it's the right thing doesn't want to necessarily put their money behind it because they're very traditional and they're very used to being near the things that they're investing in, and so that's something that's hard for people to get past. But I think it's inevitable that it's going to begin to be more decentralized because that's just the way of the world. I mean, that's the way of tech and the way of all these, what these startups are trying to do is closing those gaps and making things more widely available.
Yeah, it actually reminds me of a prior roundtable discussion we had. We were talking about the triangle of tradeoffs. Mm-hmm. And I've heard this framed this way. It was on some other podcast that was talking about the tech community, and particularly those with funding, venture-backed funding. And so the trade-off, and I think it's currently this is in the zeitgeist of debate for the tech community, which is the three things that you're kind of trying to balance in terms of location of your headquarters and your kind of your main domicile of the business is balancing where your capital is. Should you be close to your capital, i.e. your funders, like the example you were talking about, with those investors that happen to be in the Bay Area? Or should you be where your customers are? Or should you be where your people are? And so which of those three things should win out? And so historically, one of the reasons why I think a lot of people think, oh, well, the Bay Area, Silicon Valley had kind of this concentration because they had all the talent, or all the talent was flocking there and the people were flocking there. And it's kind of a chicken or egg question because the people were there, but also the VCs were there. So that's where the capital was too, right? So companies staying and starting in the same kind of traditional locations that they have had are companies that are basically on the side of we need to be close to our capital. And I've seen that in practice where if you need a lot of funding, it is going to be probably easier to get the funding if you're well networked in a community that funds, because going after funding is like, honestly, at the end of the day, it's like any other kind of sales activity. You're networking with lots of different people and building and maintaining that network. And so to the extent that you're doing that within a particular location, that there are a lot of people who invest in that in tech enterprises, and that's what Silicon Valley offers, is kind of a concentration of investors in that way, then it may, logically, it seems to me it may be somewhat easier to raise some money there. And so I think companies that are choosing to still stay in more traditional locations, it's partly because they are on the side of we should be close to our capital. I think a lot of these companies, the question of should we be close to our customer takes ironically somewhat a back seat because they are digital type companies. So their products and service are offered, over the internet and the web and in a lot of ways. And so being close to the customer is not, and they're rolling out national strategies. They're not rolling out businesses that are designed to just serve, say, the Bay Area or just serve, whatever community that they happen to be in. And so there isn't really a prime location to necessarily be close to their customer. I think if you're B2B, like enterprise, like let's say you develop a SaaS product that is specifically designed for a certain industry, then being in a location where that industry actually happens to be, being close to your customer probably makes sense, right? But if you're B2C and you're kind of rolling out to people across the country, then maybe the location doesn't matter. So this is all one big long-winded way of saying, I think what you were describing and what you're talking about in terms of companies now kind of looking to be in different locations throughout the country and saying, we can be in lower cost places. We don't have to be in these kind of traditional hubs. That strikes me as a let's be close to our people strategy. Mm-hmm. That they're basically on those companies that are doing that. They're on the side of we're going to go where the people are, and perhaps it's where there's a lower cost of living and the talent. There's good talent at a lower cost and all that, but it is a people first strategy as opposed to a capital or customer first strategy in terms of location. When I say a people first strategy, they're taking a people first strategy on where they locate themselves. And I would say one more wrinkle or irony to that point is it kind of if that's what they're doing, if companies are choosing to locate in places, it's kind of counterintuitive, right? Because you'd say, well, because of modern technology, we can be located anywhere. We don't have to be located in a traditional coastal hub city, right? But actually, it's almost the counterpoint, because to say that I'm going to go locate in, where was that, Wisconsin that we were talking about? Yeah, to say we're going to go locate in a small town in Wisconsin because there's a lower cost of living for our people and we can get talent there perhaps at a lower cost, means that you're not actually counting on being able to get people from anywhere. You're actually counting on all your people being in the same place, i.e. the lower cost of living location and the place where talent is a lower cost. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic it's kind of a counter argument, right? When as a company, if you're moving the entire company to these other locations outside the traditional hubs to be closer to your people, you've already adopted a thought process that your people are all going to be together. Otherwise, what would the point be? You could stay in the Bay Area or Seattle or LA or New York or one of these, in a hub like that, and just have your people live anywhere all over the country. And I've worked with companies that do that, and that's great. But if you're moving the entire company to one of these locations, then you must be saying that's not what we don't actually expect our people to be everywhere. We actually expect our people to kind of be here in this cool location that we found just for ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, and to be fair, when they're the one that I was referencing, the first one that they kind of based the story around was more like the interview that you had with VapeJet, where they're manufacturing like kind of a technology product. So there's like a it's not just
there is an element where they have to be physically present.
Right,
yeah.
right. And to your point, I think you could do both, right? You can have a physical manufacturing place like that, but you can have somebody do design in like Idaho or, you know what I mean? Like,
that's what I took from the article,
right.
is that it's taking all the positions that can be done somewhere else and putting them in the places where it's more cost effective to do them. It's like design or like engineering.
Right. But the actual manufacturing where you need people on site, places like Detroit, lots of skilled workers with manufacturing experience, but not a lot of manufacturing jobs to go around. Mm-hmm. And so there was another startup that moved back to Detroit. Now, not 2010 Detroit, but 2018 Detroit. That's actually on the upswing. Mm-hmm. So I did think it was interesting to hear just kind of how an investor who was totally in on something like that, and probably, well, let me back up. The thing that I think was most kind of thought-provoking to me was we have all these like WeWork stories, or the one we did last week about the cannabis company where they're not profitable. And one of the reasons why they're not profitable is because of the overhead that they have associated with it, and then they get these investments to pump more money into the valuation. So, it's building off investment money that they're hoping to get back. Mm-hmm. And you're building kind of this unsustainable business propped up on free money. Yeah. You know what I mean? So if you're looking at a startup from more of like the way I think these entrepreneurials are looking at it, where they're really looking at it from almost like a financial first kind of perspective, where they're like, man, we can do so much more with our money and probably need to raise less and have a profitable model if we're based somewhere in like Wisconsin, as opposed to if we're headquartered in London or Sydney or, some international hub, or in LA or Silicon Valley or Boston. And I think you have a better chance of surviving or striving if you're looking from a financial first kind of perspective of like real bottom line issues like fixed assets and like these big investments that are needed for something like this.
Well, I think it also depends on like how different what your business that you're trying to start up does versus what other businesses in that arena are doing. If you feel like you have something that is totally new and that other businesses aren't doing, then you're not as interested in the existing skill sets that are out there in all these other tech hubs. You think that what you're doing is revolutionary and new, so you think you can establish your own talent and find your own people. And so you're willing to take a bet on a place that's different because you think you'd rather start that way and build your own system from the ground up. And so I think that's a factor that they think about too.
Yeah, I think the access to capital question is it is one of the essential questions there. And if you're going to need a lot of juice and you're going to need that juice to keep flowing, then it's not impossible to be out of the mainstream locations, but I bet that if you do locate outside of the mainstream locations, the top executives have a lot of frequent flyer miles. I think they're traveling constantly back to network with the where the money is, because they're going to need more money, and so if it's like you say, like if you're not constantly juicing it, if you get some initial investment and you're going to carry a lot of the growth out of operating cash flow, then sure, then maybe it's not as important that you kind of stay in the network,
Right.
Because I mean, even in Portland, we're on the West Coast, and here in Portland, and we do get some VC-backed tech companies here. But even in this location, it ends up requiring a lot of traveling on the part of the executives and on the part of the VCs themselves. Sometimes the VCs are traveling in here, sometimes the executives are traveling there. If it's the Bay Area or Seattle or wherever it is. But they've got to maintain those networks in order to maintain their access to the lifeblood, the cash that they're burning in order to develop their technology. So yeah, I mean I think that's the practical limitation of the whole thing.
Yeah, I think the real rub is like if there is enough investment in those smaller kind of startup communities, if there's enough to sustain something that's going to be large or something that has a long runway for profitability, is there enough, like you said, juice in that community to keep them afloat? And I think you're right. If something has a long runway like that, or if you're running thin margins and you're trying to build a larger customer base to, like an Amazon type thing where you're making pennies on the dollar, and you're just selling billions of dollars worth of stuff, then I think you're correct that I don't think you could do that in middle of nowhere Wisconsin. Sorry, Wisconsin, if you're listening. It's not the middle of nowhere. It's a beautiful country, but it's not Boston and it's not Silicon Valley as far as funding stock.
Well, and the article brought up another really good point that's in line with what you're saying, which is that a lot of the times when they went to these places that are less popular, that when the venture capitalists that ended up making money, basically when something took off, those venture capitalists didn't want to keep their money in that place. And so basically, even though that place was successful at bringing up some business from their bootstraps, it didn't result in a boon to that economy, because their choice to initially place themselves away from these tech hubs led the investors to then also take their profits and put them somewhere other than these tech hubs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate. Yeah.
So the investment capital doesn't go back to the hub, but for sure, construction jobs, manufacturing jobs, or whatever other remedial jobs they have in the community is a boon.
Oh, for sure.
You know? So, but you're right. There's not this like revolving door of like of like a VC fund that's going to continually like churn out incubators.
Yeah, exactly.
With a scenario like you said. Now, I will say the article did mention that there's this huge investment in places like Pittsburgh, Wisconsin, Indianapolis. A lot of the recipients of like gig speed internet, when Google Fiber was doing it and stuff, laid the groundwork for there to be able to be this kind of Midwest tech kind of startup culture, and that some people did make it out and did make those, and then basically started their own small investment companies or firms by putting their money where their mouth was and going back to those hometowns. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, if I'm being less cynical, I think this is an efficiency of capital question, in the sense that if it actually is more efficient to be operating these businesses in these other locations, and what's really drawing people back to the hubs is just where the capital has to be located, or happens to be located, doesn't have to be, but happens to be located, you would hope that the efficiency of the market would correct that, and eventually the capital would find its way over there. It's just the cynical side of me is like, yeah, but markets actually aren't that efficient, and the reality is that the reason why places are the hubs they are is because of of issues that aren't purely bottom line business issues, the quality of life issues, and the thing that people like. They like being in coastal town. There's a cachet value to being in those coastal communities, other than they're crowded as heck, right? But yeah, I think people like being in those places, and so then that drives capital there, and so capital isn't necessarily being deployed the most efficiently in that regard, but.
And to your point, Ty, I don't think you're going to see like in the next 5 years, Madison, Wisconsin is all of a sudden the Silicon Valley of the Midwest. I don't think that's going to happen. I think, in 20 years, maybe.
Madison's on the list, though. When you say Madison, because I think it's like when you look at when you look at some of the towns, and I'll probably miss some of them in listing it, but it's like, Portland, I think is one of those places a lot of people want to live. It's a lifestyle town. Madison, Austin, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, what we see in the tech community, this is another talking tangents, is another tangent, but we do see that in the tech community is where you're in a situation where your workforce can kind of be anywhere. There's kind of like this common list of places that your workforce ends up, like where developers end up going. It's like somewhere in Australia, somewhere in the UK, the Bay Area, Seattle, Portland, Austin, Texas, Madison.
Don't forget Indianapolis.
Indianapolis, okay.
Well, and the only reason I say that is because a while ago there was a study done on like the most livable place, I guess, in America. And Indianapolis was the one that got the nod because the median home price and the median salary matched. It was one of the few places in the country where, like if you made like $60,000 a year, you could afford to buy like a $100,000 home that was worth living in, or like a $200,000 home.
Yep.
That was well worth that price.
Yep. Unlike
what you would get in Portland or LA for that kind of money. A cardboard box on the side of the road, but
Right.
So, but then they also did the infrastructure upgrades.
Okay.
So, don't count out. Shout out to Indianapolis.
Don't count out Indianapolis, and we're not counting out others that we missed on that list. We're not claiming to have the data, to have the expertise here to list everyone that is.
Unlike those other jerks
city.
on the coast, we don't call you guys flyover states. We
That's
we
right.
value
Yes,
Middle
that's
America.
Right. Exactly. All right.
All right, that's all I got.
Well, thank you guys. Yeah, I think this was a good session. We had some good things to talk about today. So I want to thank you both being here as always, AJ and Charlie, and to our viewers and listeners, thank you for joining us, and hit the subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube and the notification icon so that you know when we've got a new episode. And if you're listening on a podcast network, make sure to download us and subscribe to us so that you are staying up to date with our episodes as they come out weekly. So thanks again for joining us, and we will see you all next time.
See you next week.
Thank you.